Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam.
And I'm Marcia.
And we like World War II media and we want to talk about it. Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we are doing our third and final episode on the miniseries The Pacific. We're covering episodes 7 to 10. And of course, this is one of the HBO War collection pieces, along with Band of Brothers and Masters of the Air. And it happens to be our favorite. So we've had some great chats so far, and we're excited to wrap it up this week with a recurring guest for us, usually our SAS Rogue Heroes correspondent, George. So welcome back, George.
Thank you.
All right. Shall we jump right into episode 7?
Let's get into the plot. Woo! We start episode 7 pretty much where we left it, with Sledge on Peleliu in October of 1944. Sledge and company are fighting a very exhausting battle with the Japanese, and Snafu's convinced that nobody's going home. It's like, ain't nobody going home.
Yeah, Peleliu, when the Marines were first planning to go there, it was predicted that they would win that battle in 4 days. What they didn't realize was that the Japanese were extremely entrenched into the coral, and so you can do all the shelling in the world, but you're not going to get people out of a subterranean network of caves. And so the battle dragged on for more than 2 months. And it was pretty controversial because, looking back, a lot of historians have noted that it had probably negligible strategic value and really high casualty rates. And the National Museum of the Marine Corps calls it the bitterest battle of the war for the Marines. And fun side note, the National Museum of the Marine Corps is where John Basilone's Medal of Honor is. So if you want to go see it, you can do that.
One thing I really appreciate here is that they show you exactly where this place is. And I think all movies, not just war movies, all movies should tell me exactly where it takes place in a nice, handy graphical map before you get into it.
I do love the map as well, because there'll be like a big red area, like shaded area, and that's showing where the Japanese are occupying. And as the episodes move on, the shape of the red area changes. So I do like that. Like, I can kind of keep track in my mind of like, okay, here's how far the Americans have advanced.
I also like it, but I don't think I could point it out on a map at this point if I saw a complete world map yet. So that's how ignorant I am. But I just wanted to note, everybody looks so tired. They say in the beginning of the scene, I don't know who says it, I think it might be Bill Layden or something, who asks, "Where are we?" And someone else says, "I think this is the field we fought over a couple of weeks ago, judging by the planes." So there is just not a lot to see, like there's not a lot of growth, it's just all coral and just harsh terrain. And they look so tired, and I think we see the sea bees in this scene coming to look for some souvenirs, and they look all clean and all like so fresh, and nobody wants to give them their souvenirs, and one person says, "They're all right up my ass, why don't you come and get them?" And like, they're very cynical at this point in the war.
We get thrust in quite early it's straight into the battle at first, and then it's this moment of rest that you're talking about, right? I'm trying to remember which order scenes occur. It's going to sound like I haven't watched the Pacific at all. I've watched this miniseries so many times, but all through this episode in particular, there's these beautiful lingering shots that is just on Sledge's face. And you can see it's, in some movies, that would be like just the 1,000-yard stare, like this is somebody just adjusting to trauma. With this character, it really feels to me like it's the moment when the With the Old Breed narrative is being formed, if that makes sense. And you can almost sort of see that in his like cataloging of what is going on. And there is a really interesting choice in the little soundscape for the battle. You've got all the gunfire, you've got the shouting and all of the sort of battle noises, and then just as loud, you've got Sledge writing down whatever it is he's writing down. You can hear those pencil noises, and I really noticed that this time round. I thought that was just such a fascinating and beautiful choice. Yeah.
He is
Go ahead.
He is writing down the number of Japanese he's killed. He's doing a little tally in his Bible, I think. And it's
Is it people he's killed, or is it days that they've been there?
Either or, actually. I don't know. I thought it was people he killed.
It's got to be days. He's got like a tally of like 15. Surely it's days.
Maybe.
I don't know. I always assume days. It didn't even occur to me that it could be dead body.
Hopefully it's days. That's less depressing. editing Marta here, it stays.
Yeah, I like the prioritization of keeping memory, I guess, because we see that, with Leckie writing to Vera and stuff too. And obviously, Leckie and Eugene did keep all these memories and write them down after the war. So yeah, I like that too.
Quickly followed in this same scene is the conversation that Andy Haldane has with Sledge, which is a little talk about home, which I think in real life was actually a conversation he had with Hillbilly, not Haldane, but it's just a really sweet conversation, and it'll come back later in some way because Haldane talks about his dad working in the factories where they make the army blankets. And he also has the little speech about never run when you could walk, never walk when you could sit, never sit when you could lie down, never lie down when you could sleep. And there's one more line about accepting a fresh ration of water or something, I can't remember. But I do really like the scene particularly a lot, because it once again shows Haldane as this almost fatherly figure to Eugene, being this far away from home. I really like how this is portrayed, even though I doubt it was really like that in real life. But it's a nice addition in the storytelling.
Basilone's still on his war bond drive, and he's having a hard time. It's just the whole thing about people perceiving you as a hero for doing all the killing that he's done. And, he's lost some buddies at this point and just really not enjoying that particular perception of him by the general public. And also, I think there's a moment where he goes home, and when he's deciding that he's going to re-enlist, his family they completely don't understand. And so even the people who understood him really well before he went to war don't seem to really know him anymore. And I think it's just this really profoundly isolating experience for him.
It makes me think of that whole scene with Leckie, Do You Know I Went to War television. Even sort of the whole narrative of this being a miniseries about these characters, and the way that The Pacific, to me, is one of the very few miniseries that doesn't go out of its way to absolutely valorize the people it's depicting, right? And I feel like that on a meta level is what's being shown in text here, with people are reacting to John Basilone as this idea of him, this story of him that's been told. And he struggles with that because the reality isn't the truth. It's a really just fascinating to me how those two sort of concepts of narrative really sort of blend in this episode particularly.
Yeah. He's on a driving range for an entire day, just driving balls off into the distance, and you can see him trying to keep going, but you also see that he's not really dealing with any of it, because the way they show it is, at first it's light, and then suddenly it's dark, and you can tell that he's been there just the entire day.
Yeah, he's dissociating, to the point where his hands are bleeding.
Right, and there's lots of people watching him too, I'm assuming higher ups somehow. They're just standing there watching him just to make sure he doesn't lose the plot. Which, it's so dark because they need him. I hate it so much that's what happened to these men.
Back with Sledge. Yeah, so it's the middle of the night and one of their fellow Marines gets out of his foxhole. There is an altercation with a Japanese soldier, and then the US Marine is shot by one of his fellow Marines. And during the night, they don't realize this because it's too dark to see. In the morning, they have to deal with the fact that they've shot one of their own. And it's absolutely horrific. It does put me in mind of the same or similar moment in Band of Brothers, where, is it Talbot? Oh gosh, it's Talbot who gets stabbed. Unfortunately, that ends a lot better than this one. And again, I will keep returning to this. I do feel like The Pacific is almost in conversation with Band of Brothers in a way for the different approaches. And this is a scene that I think sort of mirrors that. I don't know if it's deliberate. It feels very deliberate to me. And then you've got Layden asking sort of on the walk, what kind of guy gets out of his foxhole? He's looking to blame the guy who got shot for his own mistake. And then as he gets called out for that, he goes, what kind of guy will shoot the guy? Because he's desperately trying to find somebody to blame to make sense of this situation that just does not make sense, because none of them really should be there in an ideal world. It's absolutely heartbreaking, that scene, to me.
Yeah, there's really this thing where it's like, if you read a news story about someone getting attacked by a bear and then you go into the comments and all of the comments are like, well, they should have known better than to go into the woods, or like, why wouldn't they be walking without bear spray? And it's like people trying to rationalize why that person deserved to have something happen to them so that they can feel safer and knowing that, well, that completely unimaginable event could never happen to me because I would take precautions and et cetera, that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also not the first time it's happened to them, because it happens right at the beginning of the show too, when it's a corpsman, I think, that gets shot. And then they have to kill someone because he's making a lot of noise in the middle of the night. So it's not like it's the first time it's happened, so it's constantly reaffirming that shit like this happens. And also it's fucking dark. Not just over there in real time, but also in the show. You can't see what's going on whatsoever. So I can understand stuff like that happening, and I can also understand how absolutely horrifying it is.
For sure. It's just this reinforcement of like, you as a person, you're just one guy and you don't really matter. It's like, yeah, this guy accidentally got shot. Oh, well, like life goes on for the rest of them sort of thing. And they're just in this situation where it's just like we've said before, the largest mass mobilization in history. And they just keep getting these reminders over and over again that, yeah, I mean, you'll just be one more casualty on the list, right?
Yeah, you do get also the first sort of signs of Haney, I think, sort of unraveling a little bit. Because it's like, this is what happens if you do this and this, if you get out of your foxhole at night. And it's the first signs of him having trouble, even though he's a hardened veteran and everybody respects him and looks up to him. So in another scene, when they are marching yet again, they are ambushed. And this is a very tense scene because as they are ambushed, they discover a bunker and they have to clear it, because even though it's supposed to be already cleared, Sledge hears something in the bunker and turns out to be right. And Layden is wounded in the process. Sledge really protects him, and you can see him kind of looking around as the fighting with the Japanese is very brutal. And you can see him sort of shifting, I feel, in the scene. You can see the light going out in his eyes a little bit. And in the aftermath of that, people are taking the trophies from the Japanese once again, like cutting out their teeth and all that sort of shit. And Sledge is watching as a Japanese soldier suffers, and he's like, can you please kill him already, because he's suffering? And then Snafu kills him for Sledge. And we've seen Snafu as this really hardened, kind of a little bit crazy soldier before, but you can tell that he cares about Sledge. So it's an interesting choice to make. I don't know if this happened with Snafu in real life. Some stories are attributed to certain characters that were other people's stories in real life, but it doesn't really matter, I think, for the story. It's just, it happens more than once. And then afterwards, after this has happened, and it's clearly affected them all quite a lot, you can even see R.V. Bergen quite affected by it. Halden is heard more than seen telling them, because it's in the dark again, you can't dwell on it, then you can't dwell on any of it. Because it's in the dark, it kind of stays with you a while, at least for me.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to add, except during the bunker scene, the part where Layden gets wounded and he can't see Eugene, and he hears someone get shot, and he's like yelling for Eugene because he thinks maybe it was him who got shot, and his voice is just getting like higher and like more panicked and more panicked. That scene really sets me on edge. I don't know, man. There's something about it.
It also shows you how all of them are kind of losing their humanity in that scene. They set the Japanese on fire with flamethrowers, and you can see the toll the war's taking on them, and you can see it even afterwards as they're walking away. Everybody's limping and they're all quiet, and it's just, no one's having a good time. And also, no one's thinking this war's gonna be easy.
One of our stalwart officers who's been with us from the beginning for Sledge, he's sort of Haldane's right-hand man, Lieutenant Jones, gets killed. He gets hit once, and then as they're taking him away on the stretcher, he gets hit again. And in the whole series, we don't hear him called anything except Hillbilly or maybe Lieutenant Jones. And then after he's died, Haldane leans over him and says his first name, Eddie, twice. And I think that's just a really understatedly devastating little moment. And as you were saying, Mart, Gunny Haney, who is this rough, tough old Marine from the First World War, who's been such an old salt this whole time and always knows what he's doing, seeing Hillbilly get killed is like one straw too many. And he just kind of loses it and has to be taken away off the line. And now it's Sledge's turn. Now he's a bit hardened and he gets to sort of pass on this message. You can't dwell on it.
Yep. And also they have to be stretcher bearers. Sledge and someone else are the ones to take a hillbilly back on the stretcher. As all of this is going on, you see the stretcher bearers in front of them are getting shot down. Like they need stretcher bearers for the stretcher bearers at this point. It's just completely horrible, and in part it's to do with the impossible terrain they're on. The older I get and the more I've seen this show, the more I start to appreciate how difficult it was to be there. If you go into Europe, at least you kind of know your terrain. There's going to be some hills, but it's not going to be like this.
Yeah, it's pretty difficult to dig a foxhole into coral. You don't exactly have a lot of cover.
Yeah.
If you read it around like narratives about the Pacific Theatre, one of the ideas that all these books keep returning to is that the actual experience of the war, the expectations of all of it was so utterly unfamiliar to the men who went over there, all the men and women who were around. And to couple that with just the horror of experiencing warfare, the disconnect must have been incredible. Sam, you were talking about how Haney, who's been sort of this old soul, this sort of father figure, this stalwart who has experienced all of these things before, how he starts to show the signs of wear. They notice that, one of the characters notices that and remarks on it in the show as well. And this is where we get the direct quote, Haney is the old breed. And that's where I think it really put me in mind of like, this is the episode that could essentially have been subtitled with the old breed, because this is the episode where suddenly all of these men who had been with Sledge and leading him and the others who are completely fresh and completely new, they're suddenly being taken away.
Yeah, and it's really just underscores the brutality and the unprecedented sort of warfare that they're fighting, right? Like Haney fought in World War I, which was a precedent-setting war, grimly, in its own right. But, I mean, World War II was on a whole other level again. And it's like, yeah, at a certain point, even though you've been through all that other stuff, you're in this unfamiliar place and you're going through all this weapons-grade terrible shit. And at a certain point, you just can't keep going.
On that note, we need a little laughter, and so do they. They do get a moment of laughter when Jay DeLow has got the runs, and he's trying to relieve himself in one of the caves that the Japanese kind of rest in, and he is chased out by two Japanese soldiers as he's shitting himself, and everybody's laughing at him. Even though they're trying to kill him, it's not like super funny, but still, I guess if you're in that situation, something has got to make you laugh. And it doesn't really last all that long, the laughter, because in the next scene, Haldane, who didn't have to go in front of everybody as the commander, is killed. And we can just see how much it affects literally everybody in the company. They lose their last kind of original leader. They've already lost Hillbilly, now they've also lost Haldane. It's Arvie Bergen who comes down and tells them that he's dead. And then they carry him down on a stretcher and cover him in his, quote-unquote, his dad's blanket, which is where the conversation from earlier is so nice to have that callback. But everybody's crying, so you can tell. And I think from this point, it all goes pretty badly for most of them in terms of morale. And it's a scene that makes me cry every single time I watch it. I can't not cry to this scene.
Yeah, the moment where the stretcher slows in front of Sledge and he gets to see, I mean, Haldane looks fine, except he has a teeny tiny little hole from a sniper bullet in his head. And it just really impresses upon you, this great man, this hero of his, could be brought down by something so small, just in the blink of an eye. he's here and then he's not. And such a momentous thing to have happened to all of these guys. And I pulled up the quote from With the Old Breed, and Sledge wrote, "Never in my wildest imagination had I contemplated Captain Haldane's death. We had a steady stream of killed and wounded leaving us, but somehow I assumed Ak was immortal. Our company commander represented stability and direction in a world of violence, death, and destruction. Now his life had been snuffed out. We felt forlorn and lost. It was the worst grief I endured during the entire war. The intervening years have not lessened it any. Captain Andy Haldane wasn't an idol. He was human, but he commanded our individual destinies under the most trying conditions with the utmost compassion. We knew he could never be replaced. He was the finest Marine officer I ever knew. The loss of many close friends grieved me deeply on Peleliu and Okinawa. But to all of us, the loss of our company commander at Peleliu was like losing a parent we depended upon for security. Not our physical security, because we knew that was a commodity beyond our reach in combat, but our mental security."
It's such a gripping quote, too, from that book. And it again goes to show how important he was to these young men, even though he wasn't that much older than them. And we talked to Scott Gibson about this moment a bit, too, in our interview with him, our very first celebrity guest. So if you want to go listen to that, it's a good one.
Yeah, so the battle ends, and K Company, Sledge and his buddies are all pretty much reeling. They go back to Pavuvu for what passes for R&R on Pavuvu, and they've all been irrevocably changed. They're in shock, I think.
Yeah, this is where they see the nurses. Sledge is like, what are they doing here? And then there's a fresh Marine standing there, and he's like, "You've had your look-see, move along." When they're just staring at these women with some sort of disbelief that they're even on this island. And the look Sledge gives him just cracks me up every single time, because you can see the guy kind of shrinking as he looks at him.
Yeah. Like, imagine coming from the worst place you've ever been and just seeing this beautiful woman in a nice, clean uniform. It's just, he just can't believe his eyes. He just doesn't know what he's looking at.
In our following scene, we get one of the most horrific moments, I think, of this show, is when we see Snafu chucking little bits of stone into a Japanese man's skull that's open. I can't even look at it, but neither can Sledge, because he looks at it and then he turns around. But then he also decides that he also wants to have a little souvenir. And he moves to remove the gold teeth from another Japanese corpse. And Snafu says, "Don't do it, Sledge. It'll give you bad germs." But in real life, it was a Corbin named Doc Caswell. In the book, I think it reminds Sledge of his father, who's obviously also a doctor. And it's not until later that he realizes that the doc doesn't say it because of the germs, but because he wants to spare him that further loss of humanity that his dad had also been so afraid about. And I understand the change because we don't get Doc Caswell on this show. And I think it's actually quite a bit better that it's Snafu for reasons we've already mentioned, because he's such a hardened man already and the biggest cynic. But yet he's the one to try and keep Eugene as far away from becoming that as possible. And I really like that.
And repeatedly so. Like, we mentioned the moment where Snafu steps in to mercy kill the man when the other Marine was taking his gold teeth whilst he was still alive. And Sledge was like, put him out of his misery, and the man does not. Snafu steps up to do it. And so over and over again, it's almost like Eugene is his little core of morality. He needs that. He needs Eugene to stay not untouched. It couldn't be untouched, but to keep that humanity in him.
Stay gold, pony boy.
Stay gold, pony boy.
Episode 8. John Basilone has returned to the Marine Corps to train other troops for combat, including 2 young Marines, Charles Chuck Tatum, played by Ben Asler, and Clifford Steve Evanson, played by Dwight Braswell. So he gets to go back to the army and do some army stuff. Marine Corps. I will not say army. I will get into a fight with someone.
We're going to get so many letters. Yeah, and Chuck Tatum is the one who wrote the memoir Red Blood, Black Sand. So if you want to read a memoir by someone who served with John Basilone, they sort of pulled from that for this show as well. And this is my favorite part of Basilone's plotline. This episode, we get, of course, like we'll get to it in a bit, but he meets the girl, and we also get to see him train these young guys and trying to desperately instill in these guys lessons that they'll need to survive. And I just really love, his whole thing that he's got going on in this episode.
I want to say another thing about leadership here. Like, we get Eka Haldane, we get Basilone, we get the NCOs, the other NCOs, and they show so many different types of leaders in this one show. And I think it's really interesting that they've decided to give us so many of those flavors.
Probably my favorite part is he's got them all these young guys, these young Marines lined up. And one of them says he's excited to get over there and be done their training so he can slap a slur that was used to refer to a Japanese person during World War II. And John Basilone is having none of it. He's like, do you think the Japanese soldiers are just a buck-toothed cartoon dreamed up on Madison Avenue to sell soap? Because they're not. Like, I'm here to tell you that I've been there, and if you think like that, it's going to get you killed. And I think that whole scene is it's my favorite. Like, I absolutely love it.
It's a fantastic scene. And what I really appreciate about it as well is that it acknowledges the Japanese as sort of a very human enemy combatant, which, again, is something that I find a lot I was discussing this with Macho before the call, it's missing from books and narratives and media talking about fighting against the Japanese, as if sort of the Japanese are more sort of a subhuman enemy than the Europeans that they're fighting. And the fact that we've got a character explicitly going out of their way to say, that is something we've made up to tell you. The people who have told you to think like that are wrong. You've got to have the respect because it will keep you alive, yes. But also, he, I think, takes pains to say, they've trained, they've been at war, they know what they're doing. It's not just like stay alert. These are actual guys who've got experience, who've got knowledge, who've got understanding. And I think that's an incredibly powerful statement for the Pacific to be making.
Yeah, for sure. From a guy who would know, right? It's exactly. Like, well, then one of my favorite characters gets introduced because John meets a fellow Marine, Sergeant Lena Riggy, played by Annie Paris, and it's not necessarily love at first sight on her part because she gives him a lot of shit for his Ho era, but ultimately they fall in love, and I love her so much.
She's the best. She's so good. As one does. I was reading her obituary earlier, and I really want to read out this little bit from it. Right, so it was from a friend of hers. So she served as a field cook on the base, and her title was Sergeant, said Barbara Garner, longtime friend and roommate. Her attitude was, I can do anything that they can do. And I love that. I love that they make a point to say she is a Marine, she is a sergeant, she has earned the position she is. She is not just this side character in John Basilone's story.
Yeah,
I love it.
Absolutely. And this is a woman who she's in her early 30s, and she's from a traditional family, and she's not married. And she's not married, I think, partly because she simply doesn't need to be. She left home to go to business school. She broke with her traditional family over it. She talks about that in the show, how her family sort of didn't acknowledge her for a while. And yeah, so she's in her early 30s. She's a Marine during World War II, and she's kind of living her own life. And so when war hero John Basilone shows up and turns on the charm, initially she's like, yeah, I know who you are, but I don't need you. Like, I don't expect me to fall all over myself for you. I have my own life. I have my own priorities. I have my own goals and my own dreams and that kind of stuff. And I just love that. I think she's such a great character.
And he finds it utterly charming too, right? Immediately, you can tell that he kind of likes, because he's had all that on like his war bond drive, and he's had all the women falling over him. And that's obviously not giving him what he's looking for either, so you can tell that when he meets Lena, he likes that spice in her and that resistance that he gets from her.
Yeah, for sure. I don't necessarily think it's just about sort of the romantic angle of like women falling over him as well. Everybody has been treating him with this sort of adulation. And then there's Lena who comes along and says, yeah, I've seen hundreds of guys just like you who have let some kind of accolade go to their heads and end up the Playboy. It's effectively, she's saying, tell me why you're different. Show me why you're different. And then I will give you my time. And that's so wonderful.
Oh, yeah. And he really needed someone to look past that war hero shit. Like, I think he just got so used to, and like I was saying earlier, he went home and his family are just looking at him like he grew two heads because he decided to re-up his time in the Marines. And it's like all these people just feel so alien to him. And then he meets this woman who completely just doesn't fall for any of it and is actually looking at him. And like for him, I think that's just huge.
The fact that they have breakfast for their date and not like it's not a fancy date with dinner. He goes to where she's working. They have breakfast together. They have coffee. And they tell each other these beautiful stories over coffee. And then he has what ends up being the most romantic line, which is what incredible things can happen over a cup of coffee. And it's so gentle. It's so beautiful. And they are on this completely equal footing. And that's what I love about their relationship.
Could be a good commercial for a coffee brand.
Yes.
I feel like someone on the internet has probably made it a coffee brand at some point. So we're back on Pavuvu with Sledge and his friends. Jade and Lowe's transferred out of their unit. But then do we see someone throw away Haldane's book into like a barrel of some kind, I remember. And the book is Men at War.
Yeah, it's a collection of stories about war as compiled and edited by Ernest Hemingway, who we have recently discussed in an episode of our show, Hemingway and Gellhorn. If you would like to go listen to us talk at length about Hemingway and masculinity, it's not really surprising that he would have compiled a book of war stories, but this moment comes right from Sledge's memoir with the old breed, and he finds a copy of this book and he puts it back and he's like, after where I've been, I don't need to read these fantastical, idealistic war stories. Like, I can't. He's like, I know what it's really like now.
Over and over again in the Pacific, we see sort of books as an extension of identity. So you've got Eugene giving Sid a book to take with him. Then Sid leaves that with Leckie, who's got his library. And now you've got this moment. And as you say, Sam, I don't think we see it in the show, but there's the sense that like these are stories about war and he doesn't need it anymore, so it can be put aside. But is that not also what Sid did with the Kipling? But he put it aside in a place that it would be cherished and looked after. Like that's a little piece of him and his home and his identity that he leaves somewhere sort of as safe as it could be. And so there is definitely something around that I don't know if I've quite thought through yet, because I was thinking about it all day today and I wanted to mention it, but I haven't got all of the pieces.
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure a contrast watching Eugene throw Haldane's book into this barrel where it's going to be burned. You know, it's like, it's less about me leaving my childhood somewhere safe where someone could take care of it and more about just being like, there's nothing salvageable in this book of war stories. Obviously, it didn't serve Haldane in the end. He's a young man who's no longer with us. And then now, you know, Eugene picks up this book and he's like, ugh. Like, can you imagine reading these idealistic war stories and thinking that like there's anything of value in here when I've seen how it really is?
I feel like it adds to the story of Eugene's kind of disillusionment with the war too. Very directly, because obviously he had this idea about war. He's so disappointed that he can't go and he feels like that's the only way he can be useful. And then now he's there and he thinks, well, what use is any of this that I'm doing on this rotten island with this stinking coconuts and all that shit? And it's just, I find it very poignant to see him discard all those ideals that he had about the war maybe before into a barrel where it can be burnt, like you said.
Basilone and Lena get married. This is in the summer of 1944, and they get to have this little cute honeymoon where they go to a cottage. It's really lovely. And then, unfortunately, Basilone and his baby Marines that he's been training land on Iwo Jima. And there's quite a fierce battle, and Basilone is killed on the beach. That was February 19th, 1945. Lena got the telegram that John was killed on her 32nd birthday. There's a scene when they're in the cottages on their honeymoon, and John's lying in bed, and Lena kind of turns around in the doorway and just looks at him for a second. And there's just something about that look that makes me think, how many times for the rest of her life did she kind of just close her eyes and put herself in that doorway? just looking at him in the happiest moment of their lives right after they got married.
I also kind of feel like she knew, or at least they both knew, that it might not be a very long time that they would have together. I don't know why I think that, but it just feels like that. At least in the show, it feels like that.
I wonder if it feels like that, or I wonder if we project that onto it, because we know it's doomed.
I do think that quite a few relationships during the war were like that. You know, there's sort of quite a speedy sort of intimacy, and because they knew that there was something that, you know, it was like in peacetime, I can expect to have a long time with you. We don't know what's going to happen. So whether or not that was the case for these two, I don't know. But I think a lot of relationships did have that sense.
We get that, and we talked about this other show, The Narrow Road to the Deep North. Did I say correctly for once?
Mm-hmm.
I did, yeah. And it happens there too, where they just get married quickly and have this romance that's really almost just begun, and then they get married, and because the war is happening and there's no time to lose. So it does add that sense of urgency to everything in life, I think.
For sure. And we know from letters that John wrote home to his family that he really wanted to get married. He was always telling his mom that he wanted to have a wife and kids and all that kind of stuff. And just imagine how badly he wanted to get married that he didn't even want to wait for his Italian mama to be there. I mean, like, man, that shit must have felt urgent, right? Like, for an Italian mama's boy to get married and, you know, be like, yeah, we're doing it today. Sorry, the family can't make it.
The scene that shows him dying and laying like on a blackened earth. And I think the camera kind of moves up and we look at him from above, lying there on the battlefield. I almost wish we could have seen a little bit more of the battle because it happened so quickly. But I do think it's quite effective the way they show him dying amidst all the chaos without really stopping to say goodbye to him. They just kind of leave him there. And that's the end of the episode. So, episode 9, Okinawa this time, May 1945. Sledge and Snafu are welcoming, quote-unquote, because they're not really that welcoming, some new Marines called Peck, played by Christopher Foy, and Ham, played by Noel Fisher. And they also have a new platoon leader, who is Second Lieutenant Robert McKenzie, played by Ashley Zuckerman. And, like, they don't like any of them. They've lost all their friends, they've all either gone home or they're dead. So now there's all these new guys and they have to kind of readjust to find their place within the platoon again. So
yeah, everybody's extremely fucking on edge. If you've ever been in a group of people and you can just tell that the next time someone says literally anything, there's going to be an argument. That's what it's like. And extra special shout out to Noel Fisher, because I think he's just such a little cutie in this with his like little blonde hairdo and his big eyes. I don't know. He's a delight.
In a series with a whole lot of blondes in it, he is possibly the blondest, I think.
He's so blonde.
Isn't that a band name? A whole lot of blondes?
It should be.
I guess the rest of the group are the 4 non-blondes, and he's the blonde. The Marine Peck, Snafu calls him Kathy because he has this picture of a woman, ostensibly his wife. I don't know if he said that she was his wife or if they just all sort of implied that it was his wife. But anyway, it's not his wife. And there's this whole thing where they're just razzing him about this. Snafu tricks him out of the good rain poncho and gives him his old shitty one that has all these holes in it. So Peck is like, well, I'll show him. And so he takes the rain poncho that's keeping the mortars dry because they're in the middle of a torrential rainstorm for the 17th time this series. And so he takes the good one that's covering the mortars and he puts Snafu's old shitty poncho on top of the mortars. And of course, they all get wet. And when they get wet, they don't work so good. And that, of course, makes everybody even more mad than they already were. And of course, Snafu's not going to take responsibility for initiating that particular cycle of events. And so just people are getting more and more up each other's asses and nobody is happy.
To be fair, Snafu is kind of treating Peck the same shitty way he was treating Eugene when he just got Pavuvu, making him clean the oil drums, even though nobody told him to do that. It's hazing, but it's bad, but it's also kind of funny, except at this point in the war, nothing's really that funny anymore.
Yeah. Now that they're on Okinawa too, this is not an uninhabited island. There are civilians on Okinawa. In fact, to this day, there is a huge fuck off American airbase on Okinawa, and that causes friction with the inhabitants of Okinawa. So you can look into that if you like. There's quite a few stories about that. But yeah, so there's civilians around, obviously, in the middle of an active war zone. This is not a good thing. Everyone's having a terrible time. There's even a moment where they get friendly fired on by their own artillery. And Sledge is just, he's had enough. He's like, no one cares about us. You know, that this, of course, this would happen. And there's a moment where he gets in trouble because he doesn't stop shooting when he's been told to stop shooting. And he says, I hope they don't surrender. And we kill every last one of them. He's just neck deep in nihilism at this point. Like, he really doesn't have any hope left. He doesn't feel like he has any humanity left. He's just like, yeah, well, I was sent here to kill them, so that's what I'm going to do.
And this is exactly the thing that his dad was afraid of, that he warned him about at the very beginning of the show. Like, don't let them tear your humanity away from you. You can see it coming a mile away as a viewer, as we go on this journey with him. But still, the moment it gets there, it really hurts.
There's a really sad bit with Ham, I think. He basically questions, why they're not giving the civilians safe passage through, why they can't help them. And everybody treats him like, oh, you're just not used to killing yet. You're not used to people dying yet. And that isn't quite the point he was making, I think. But they haven't got the ability even to comprehend that other point, that these are just innocent people who are caught in the crossfire.
Yeah, it's been so long since they've been in a context of, when you're in your everyday, reasonable, rational life where you haven't done any killing, then of course you would be like, well, we're going to give the civilians safe passage. And it's been so long since they've been in any scenario where they don't have to think about killing all the time, where they're just like, that point of view doesn't make any sense to me.
Mm-hmm. So I was doing sort of a little bit more reading about the civilians and the people who lived on Okinawa. And one of the things, like, all of it is horrible. All of it is heartbreaking. But one of the things that really hurts is there were a lot of essentially school kids who were then volunteered, in very much air quotes, to the boys to fight with the Japanese and the girls to go in as nurses. And these students were basically told that, we're on the cusp of winning everything and you're going to be fine. We just need you to come and help us and get rid of these awful interlopers and dreadful enemies who will commit every atrocity against you. And obviously they were then thrust into this situation where they had no hope. And no hope from either side. They weren't going to get any mercy from the Americans. They weren't getting any support from the Japanese. I mean, I think when it even got towards the end, when the Japanese realized that actually this is it, the students were effectively abandoned. And that's when a lot of them were killed. There is at least one museum, I think there might be two, but one I think is dedicated to telling the story of one of the girls, or two of the girls' schools who were involved in this. It's the Himeuri Cenotaph and Peace Museum. And just the stories that are there about the numbers of these kids that were killed is just heartbreaking.
Where is this museum?
It's in Okinawa.
So Layden can't get a break. He's wounded again, but this time he's evacuated home. Sledge has to do a difficult thing, and he calls down an artillery strike on a nearby house. And then he has a little bit of beef with Mackenzie about it.
Yeah, this is sort of getting into the turning point for Sledge again, because this episode is so dark and hard for everyone and for us watching it. And then when Sledge and Snafu and some of the others go around to clear the area, he goes into this house where there's a dead family and there's a big old hole in the roof, and he has to wonder, was it me who called down that artillery strike? Like, did I do this? And being confronted with the deaths of these civilians that were possibly his fault, his initial humanity starts to come back. It's a little bit easier for him to access, because instead of being sort of numbed to all of it, he's confronted with this terrible thing and he has to start to think about everything again. And yeah, I really like that this episode lets us go down into the depths of this horrible misery that he's in, and then he starts to come out the other side a little bit towards the end of the episode.
I feel like Joe Mazzello is robbed of an... I feel like he should have been an Emmy for this role. He's quite effective.
Yeah, and right after that, he sees some new Marines kill a young Japanese soldier, and it's really like a kid in a uniform. He's unarmed, and him and Sledge make eye contact with each other, and then before Sledge knows what's happened, these new Marines have shot him. And this profoundly affects him because he's starting to realize, what is all this killing for? You know what? Maybe I don't want to come here and kill every last one of them. Like, maybe I want to actually start,
It's quite amazing how they do his arc, like his emotional arc, so well in such a short amount of time. It could have just as easily not worked with the amount of time passing, but it works really well. I think it's one of the most effective pieces of television I've ever seen, for sure.
The Pacific, whilst it goes dark and it goes brutal, it doesn't end up like those kind of gritty, grim, dark films that were quite all the rage a little while ago. It says, okay, there is brutality, but there is hope that you can come back out of it, and people are still people. There is something of humanity everywhere, even in these incredibly grim times. And I think that's really beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you can find yourself again. You can come out the other side. I really like that too.
Also, him with two ends gets killed, and it's really sad.
Such a bummer. Yeah, Peck is this young Marine who's been made fun of and hazed this whole time. He just loses it, and because of his actions, the consequences that Ham gets killed and Peck gets taken off the line, and yeah, it's just really grim.
And at the very end of the episode, we get a mention of the atomic bomb being dropped in Japan by Mackenzie.
Yeah, so things are almost over.
Episode 10. Take it away, Sam.
August 15th, 1945, Leckie is in a military hospital in Long Island, New York, and he gets the news that the Japanese have surrendered. And I honestly don't think he really knows what to do with it at first. It probably seemed like that was never going to happen for a little while there. And Sledge and his buddies also learn about it. They're still on Okinawa, and they have a little end of the war celebration. I hesitate to call it a celebration because they're kind of sat apart from everyone else, and they're more just kind of like, well, fuck me, I guess it's over.
Yeah, and also, what is there really to celebrate? Because they've seen so many horrible things, and their lives are forever different. And it doesn't feel like something worth celebrating, even though it is over.
I imagine in a way it just also doesn't feel real, right? Because how do you let go of that adrenaline, that sort of like drive that has kept you alive all of these months? And then just because you've been told something's over, how do you let that go?
And it's again different from the war in Europe, right? Where the war is over and there were people in the streets celebrating people you've liberated.
Exactly.
It's a different kind of celebration.
Yeah. This is one part of the show where I thought that Hanks and Spielberg had the opportunity to, this whole time we've been getting to see this strain of nihilism from Bob Leckie. And then, the biggest moment of all at the end of his memoir is when he's talking about the dropping of the atomic bomb, and they just don't really elaborate on it in the show. So I wanted to read this quote from Bob Leckie's memoir about the atomic bomb. And now to that victim whose sign rose above the world 2,000 years ago, to be menaced now by that other sign now rising, I say a prayer of contrition. I, whom you have seen as irreverent and irreligious, now pray in the name of Chuckler and Hoosier and Runner, in the name of Smoothface, Gentleman, Amish and Oak Stump, Ivy League and Big Picture, in the name of all those who suffered in the jungles and on the beaches from Anzio to Normandy, and in the name of the immolated, of Texan, Rutherford, Chicken, Loudmouth, of the artist and white man, Souvenirs and Racehorse, Dreadnought and Commando. Of all these and others, dear Father, forgive us for that awful cloud.
I want to do finger snaps for that, but I can't do it. But in my mind, I am. It's such a brave thing to do. I say brave, it shouldn't be called brave, because everybody should feel like this about the atomic bomb. But to put it in your book like that, as like a very last statement, is very honest, and I do appreciate it.
And it's incredible that it's from somebody who was there, because even today, I've had conversations with people who are like, well, we had to do it. And so to have that powerful statement from Leckie in his book, who was there, it means a lot.
For sure. especially since I think it would be easy for us now, especially if you're only a casual follower of history, to look back and think that everyone wanted to drop the atomic bomb and thought it was a good idea. Clearly not the case. Even Harry Truman had second thoughts, the president. And so, so I really love that passage in Leckie's book. I think it's tremendous. Like, once again, can't plug Helmet for My Pillow enough. And I wish we could have gotten a little bit of that in the show.
Yeah. So this is the return home episode. So we get to see everybody that goes home. One of them being Sledge, who returns home in 1946, having stayed behind another 6 months to serve in China, which he talks about in the book China Marine, if you want to read more about it. We've obviously seen his family before in the beginning of the show and during too, but we now get to see them with him, and he has a difficult time settling back into his normal life. He goes to a job market where he's asked about what he can do, and he says to this poor girl who doesn't know what to do with him that he's been taught to kill Japanese and to, I think he says something about bombs, but how do you get back to normal life after that? Would be impossible almost to go back to normal life because everybody else has stayed behind, and for them life has gone on in the US. But he gets back home and his life is completely different. We do get to see sort of the opposite end of that is Sid, who's been home for 2 years and who has settled back into normal life. He's getting married, and they have a fun little conversation about it when Sid picks him up from the station as he gets home. But he's pretty well adjusted, and they go to a dance together. There's a little dance, and Eugene is like, I don't know how to do this. I don't want to do this. I don't even want to get up in the morning. And Sid tells him that you just have to get up every morning and it'll get a little bit easier every single day. So we get sort of the bookend, I suppose, of their relationship together, where they're finally together again. They're very different men, but then Sid has been home for 2 years and he's had 2 years to readjust. And we see Eugene going on a hunt with his dad, and he seems to be fine until he collapses into a field and cries because he cannot fire a gun anymore, and his dad just holds him, and this makes me cry again. It's one of those scenes.
It's so beautiful. That is, again, it's like, yes, this is what his dad was afraid of would happen, but also we've got two people there who understand what has happened to him and can, like, you get the sense that he can be supported, and that I think is very hopeful.
For sure. There's a story I've heard Henry Sledge tell, that's Eugene Sledge's son, where when he was a kid, his mom told him, if you need us in the middle of the night, don't go to your dad's side of the bed, like wake me up and I'll wake dad up. And I guess she had been talking to Sid Phillips, and Sid was like, if you need to wake him up in the middle of the night, don't shake him awake. Lean over and whisper in his ear, sledgehammer, wake up. Because it was like, yeah, if you shake him awake at night, like, and he doesn't know where he is, kind of thing. And I just thought that was quite a poignant reminder of the way that the war kind of followed them into their civilian lives, and the fact that Sid did understand what Eugene was going through. Lena visits John's parents for the first time, and she goes into this house in New Jersey, and previously when we've seen it, it's been full of love and light and life. It's full of John's family. There's kids running around, whatever. Lena gets there, and the house is dark and just stifling with grief. And it's just John's parents, his brother's there too. And it's just such a awkward, stilted, sad interaction. And they're having this whole conversation, and it's like, this meeting between them should be a joyful thing. Like, she's their new daughter-in-law, and instead there's this like awful chasm, this hole where John should be. And she gives John's poor, sweet little old dad his Medal of Honor, and the old man just breaks down. And this scene to me is gutting. Like, to me, this is the saddest scene in all of HBO War.
I don't have anything to add to that, to be honest, because it's true. It's the people who stay behind that affect you the most. Like, people die in war, we know this, but the people who stay behind, who have to deal with their dying, having to deal with that loss, is always very emotional.
I did read a war memoir recently, and the dedication, the end of it was, and to those who had a harder job at home we just visited of other people waiting, which I thought was beautiful. It speaks to what you were saying.
And we get to finish up our third storyline, which is Leckie's. He returns home to his family and to his old room that's been taken over by some other job that's no longer really his room. And he gets his old job back and he tracks down our lovely friend Vera at home, who's on a date with some other guy. And he just shows up and is like, "Hey Vera, I'm back. Are you busy?" And he's like, "Yes, she is." And she's like, "No, I'm not." And it's just really funny. I love this scene. And we learn that the whole time we've been seeing him write letters to Vera, he's written them but he's never sent them to her. And she asks him when they're on a date, what were the letters like? And he says, "The best stuff I ever wrote." But they haven't survived. I don't think he brings them with him.
No, the rain washed them all away on Gloucester, he says.
So sad. I would have loved to have seen those in a publication.
Yeah, I love it. There's a whole little scene towards the end, too, with Leckie and Vera. I love them. I just think they're so charming together. There's a scene where they're having a family dinner, and one of their family members who didn't fight is talking about how, oh, there's this union doing this and that, and it's delaying everything and whatever. And he's like, "That's not what we fought for." And Bob Leckie's like, "Oh, really? What did we fight for?" Because, you know, he's just a pot stirrer to the last, right? Like, he's not going to let things go. And they're talking about the idea of television and how silly and frivolous it is. And he's like, "You know what I fought for? I fought for television." And Vera kind of smiles at him and he kind of smiles back. And it's like, you can tell that he does have these really deep-seated feelings about it. And because it's Leckie, he is going to be a little flip. But at least he's married to this woman who kind of seems to understand him.
And then we get a very big amount of end cards.
I love it. They do this thing where they'll show the actor in the show and then they'll show the real person. And if at the time when they made the Pacific, the person is still alive, you also get a picture of them as like an old man. So I liked that aspect of it.
So the first one is about Eugene. Eugene Sledge earned a PhD in biology, then spent a career teaching at the University of Montevallo, I hope that's how you pronounce it, sorry guys, in Alabama. From notes he got throughout the war, Eugene eventually wrote his memoir With the Old Breed at Peleliu and Okinawa, which was published in 1981. Survived by his wife, 2 sons, and 3 grandchildren, Eugene died in 2001.
Robert Leckie married Vera Keller in 1946 and became a correspondent for the Associated Press. He wrote nearly 40 books, including his combat memoir, Helmet from My Pillow, in 1957. Robert died in 2001. He is survived by Vera, 3 children, and 6 grandchildren. And one thing that I think is really lovely is that he wrote his first 3 books on a typewriter that Vera gifted to him. Yeah, lovely.
Aww.
Yeah, we actually did an episode 2 on South Pacific, and South Pacific was the musical that Robert Leckie walked out of because he was like, that's not what the Pacific was really like, and that's what motivated him to write his memoir. So if you wanted to go listen to our episode about that, you can definitely do that. I was reading the transcript of an interview with Leckie recently when he was an older man, because a lot of the books that he wrote were history books, and a lot of them were about the Pacific. And he's being interviewed, and he keeps, like, periodically he'll stumble over his words or something, and 3 or 4 times in the interview he says, "Oh, it's not Alzheimer's, I'm just an old man." And unfortunately, Robert Leckie did die after a tough battle with Alzheimer's. And to me, there's something really, I guess, poignant about the idea of someone who articulated his memories so beautifully and evocatively for other people. You know, he wrote this stunning memoir, and it's the image that a lot of people have of the Pacific experience in World War II. And then, you know, for him to have lost those memories at the end of his life, sad.
Yeah.
Not to undercut the poignancy of this, but going back to what you just said about South Pacific, I love the idea that there are all these guys that are writing memoirs to get through the pain and sort of like get out the horrors from their heads into this or as direct responses to like, well, we need to tell the real story of the horrors we went through. And then there's Leckie going like, that is wrong. Let's fix it. That's the most Robert Leckie thing I've ever heard.
For sure. He's like, this memoir is motivated like at least 40% by pure pettiness and spite.
John Basilone was awarded a posthumous Navy Cross and Purple Heart for his actions on Iwo Jima. Since 1945, stamps have been issued with his likeness, and ships and highways have been christened in his honor. John is remembered every year with a parade in his hometown of Raritan, New Jersey.
And John was originally buried on Iwo, but he got repatriated and he's at Arlington National Cemetery now, should you happen to be in the neighborhood and you would like to pay your respects. Lena Basilone was told on her 32nd birthday that her husband had been killed on Iwo Jima. They had been married for only 7 months. She never remarried and died in 1999. And, well, we have thoughts on this. Go ahead, George.
That's her entire card. And I hate it. I hate that so much because Lena had a really long active life. She was a member of multiple voluntary organizations. She worked for the electric company I was reading. She volunteered at veteran hospitals. She really enjoyed throwing dinner parties with all of her millions of friends. She had this gorgeously full life. She was not just sort of sitting there my life has ended because the love of my life has passed on. Yes, that is a huge part of what has happened to her in her life, but it's not everything. And I do think it's really sad that is all she gets in the Pacific in the title card. We love a tragic woman narrative in stories, but in real life, let's allow her the grace to have had a real life.
Sure.
And so Lena, I believe, is buried in Riverside National Cemetery in California. And I found out a fun fact about that cemetery, which I'm going to share with you now, which is one of the people who is also buried there is the guy who wrote the very first broadcast episode of Star Trek.
Wow.
She's in good company. Yeah, well, they had asked her if she wanted to be buried at Arlington with John, but she said that she didn't want to be a bother.
Ugh.
Yeah.
No! God, that's so sad.
Yeah, but I was listening this morning to an interview with John and Lena's great niece by the Donut Dollies. Shout out, we did an episode with them a little while ago if you want to go listen to that. And she was talking about how Lena would host all the big family dinners. She would have everybody over to her house. She liked to cook for everybody. She even at some point, a few years, maybe 10 or 12 years after the war, she even had a low-key man friend. She never married again, but it's not like she was lonely and she didn't have anybody in her life. So, yeah, I don't know. I understand the desire to be oh my God, she loved him so much she never remarried. But I honestly feel this was a woman in her early 30s who was not married, which was unusual for the time when she met John. And I think she just really maybe was not so much the marrying kind. And then after she loved and lost John, she was okay, well, I don't need to do that again. She went on and she lived a full life.
I think it's a really relatable thing. She was waiting for somebody completely exceptional to interrupt her life and the way she wanted it to be. She found that in John. And then she maybe didn't necessarily find that again with somebody else. And that was okay because she had this entire life. I respect that.
Hell yeah. We love Lena. This is a Lena Basilone fan account.
Runner Bud Connolly returned to Buffalo, New York in November of 1944. He married his childhood friend Marietta and sold cars for over 40 years. Bud died in 1997, survived by 6 children, 11 grandchildren, and 9 great-grandchildren. That's a lot.
It is. Hoosier Bill Smith survived the wounds he suffered on Peleliu. It's great that they tell us this in an end card because we simply never find it out during the show. He returned to his hometown of Luguti, Indiana, got married, and raised 4 children. Bill died in 1985.
Chuckler Lou Jurgens was honorably discharged from the Marine Corps 2 weeks after war's end. He married and worked as a steam fitter in Chicago. Lou remained close friends with Bob Leckie, Runner Connolly, and Hoosier Smith until he died in 1982. There's more? Of course there's more. There's a ton of them.
Y'all, when I was typing these out, I was getting ready to throw my laptop across the room. Snafu Marielle Shelton stayed in Louisiana, worked in the lumber business, married, and had 2 sons. Marielle did not speak with his fellow Marines for over 35 years until he read Sledge's book, With the Old Breed at Peleliu and Okinawa. Sledgehammer served as a pallbearer at Snafu's funeral in 1993.
Bill Layden became a professional golfer after recovering from his wounds he received on Okinawa. He corresponded regularly with other veterans, including Eugene Sledge, until passing away in 2008.
Truly, I don't know what's funny about it to me, but the idea of recovering from your war wounds and being you know what I want to do? Play golf for money. I'm good for him.
Yeah.
Hugh Corrigan was promoted to captain and married Elizabeth Vincent in 1944 while stationed in the U.S. He returned to action and was wounded on Okinawa in 1945. After the war, he and his wife lived in Ithaca, New York, until his death in 2005.
Louis Chesty Puller was one of the most decorated Marines in the history of the Corps. His extraordinary career spanned from World War I through Korea. Chesty Puller retired in 1955 and passed away in 1971.
So he basically was born, became a Marine, and then died.
Well, yep.
Clifford Steve Evanson, that was the second baby Marine that John Basilone was training back in episode 8. He was 17 years old when he was killed in action on Iwo Jima.
Ouch. Chuck Tatum, which was the other baby Marine, was awarded the Bronze Star for his service on Iwo Jima. After the war, he designed and drove race cars, which is neat. He lives in Stockton, California, which is where my family in the US lives. Which I think
that's
is funny.
cool.
Yeah.
Romus Walton-Bergen married his Australian sweetheart Florence in Jewett, Texas in 1947. They have 4 daughters. Bergie and Florence still call Texas home. And I am obsessed with the fact that they just call this man Bergie throughout the show. And then you find out that his name was Romus Walton.
Incredible name.
It's great. And I think it's really cute that he met this woman in Australia and was like, I will repatriate this girl and I'll marry her.
Sidney Phillips and Mary Houston Phillips raised 3 children. So Mary Houston is the girl that both Eugene and Sid had a crush on when they were kids. And Sid got to marry her. Sid became a doctor and practiced medicine in Alabama for 38 years. Sid and Eugene remained best friends for the remainder of Sledge's life. Sid still lives in a small town outside of Mobile. He's no longer alive, unfortunately, at this point.
That final image of him is just gorgeous, though. It's such a wonderful note to end on.
Yeah, such a smiley guy. And yeah, he has a memoir. I think Bergie has a memoir. Like a few of these guys have memoirs if you want to go and check it out.
And I've mentioned this before, but I just got Henry Sledge's book, which is The Old Breed, The Complete Story. And it's him using unpublished things from his dad's manuscript and kind of giving you context from his own memory of his dad, and it's quite lovely to read if you want to go and read that. We do need to make George rate this series.
Well, we also have to rate this series because we have not rated the whole series yet.
No, good point. That's a very good point. What are we rating it out of? Let's rate it.
In our hearts, Andy Haldane didn't die. He lived happily ever after out of 10.
Perfect. I like that. George, you have to go first because you're the guest.
Cool. I do rate it a million. In our hearts, Andy Haldane didn't die out of 10 because I was thinking about this earlier and I said this, I think, was one of the greatest war series I think's ever been made. I might refine that opinion too. I actually think this is the best. I don't think anyone's beaten the Pacific yet for me. So
that's a tough act to follow for a rating. I'm gonna rate it a 9 out of 10 in our hearts, and the Haldane didn't die and lived happily ever after. The reason I'm giving it a 9 and not a 10 is because it's too dark. Like, not mentally too dark, but just too dark as visually too dark. And it's so annoying, and I wish I could see what was going on in those scenes, and there's so many of them, so that's why lacking 1 point. And also, I love this theme tune and the whole soundtrack, and I could listen to it for days. So, special mention to that.
Yeah. If I were being objective, I would say that this show probably should lose points because it's pretty poorly lit in places, and because sometimes the storyline can be a little disjointed, and because I think the Melbourne episode is a little weak. So there's definitely a few things that could be changed, but I just love it so much and I never get sick of it. And every time I watch it, I find new things to enjoy. I think Lena is great. And so any points that it lost for those other things, it gets back because Lena's terrific. So yeah, I'm going to give it a 9.5 in our hearts. Andy Haldane didn't die and lived happily ever after. I don't necessarily think it's 100% accessible if you're not super into World War II media. Like, I think you'd have an easier time probably watching and getting into Band of Brothers, for example. But I just think, man, they did such a good job of bringing home all of these big themes. All the characters are so like rich and real and vivid. And yeah, I just love it so much.
Perfect. Thank you for being on, George, with us today.
Thank you for letting me talk about my favorite war show of all time.
You're welcome. Everybody else, thank you for listening. You can follow us wherever you get your podcast and rate us 5 stars. You really should. We deserve some more ratings. And And you can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast. You can visit our website, rosieTheReviewer.com, for more information. You can send this episode and all our other episodes to friends, because everybody needs to agree that this is the best war show there is. And I guess we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.